friends, it's Teresa and welcome back to my channel. It's actually been a minute since I've done a sit-down video, or I guess in this case a stand-up video. Today's video is going to be me discussing my thoughts on If We Were Villains by ML Rio. I recently read this in May? No, I read this in April. I read this toward the end of April and I just share my thoughts with the world. But if you guys want to know more about my thoughts on this book, let's go ahead and into the video. So to start off, this is an adult dark academia, I guess almost mystery novel in a sense, almost murder mystery, very whodunit. It was ML Rio's debut novel. This follows, I believe, 6 or 7 students in Delacour Classical Conservatory, which is a college specifically toward artistic majors. This follows a group of thespians whom during these past 4 years have immersed themselves in Shakespeare. They live, breathe, and die Shakespeare. They speak in Shakespeare quotes. Now this follows 10 years later, Oliver, who is now just being released from prison. And as he's being released, he's finally telling his officer, whom was the one who arrested him, the exact truth of what happened during their senior year that eventually led to their classmate's death, and revealing the truth as to whether or not he was the one who actually had a hand in it, who had a hand in it, and whether or not he was the only guilty party involved. As I said, this is ML Rio's debut novel. I don't know if she's released anything since then. I think this has been out for about 5 or so years by now. Now, given the fact that this is dark academia and this is like a whodunit murder mystery situation, there are going to be some trigger warnings. I'm sure I missed a couple, but I will be sure to have my Storygraph review for this linked down below with all the trigger warnings. Actually, I can just grab my notes because I made notes, so why wouldn't I use them? Obviously, there's going to be death in this one. There is murder, there is profanity, there is violence, there is drinking, there's also drug abuse or drug addiction that you get to see more in depth toward the end of the novel. There is some slut shaming, some homophobic and transphobic comments. Let's see, some physical assault, some violence, mentions of depression, mentions of suicide, eating disorders, self-harm, and obvious PTSD. Oh, and slut shaming. Let's start off with my first thoughts. Now, I was super hesitant on picking this up. I have had a friend read this a couple of years ago and mentioned that there were just so many references to Shakespeare. And not to say that like I don't enjoy Shakespeare. I have read Shakespeare. I have Shakespeare on my shelves. So it's not like it's news to me, but I don't read Shakespeare to the same extent that these the kids, the students do in the book. So I don't know exactly like Henry V, or Henry VIII I should say, or some of his more obscure works, which again they do reference. I only know like Macbeth, Romeo and Juliet, Hamlet, King Lear, what was the other one? Julius Caesar. So there are some that I'm just like, eh. So I was really hesitant, and I put this book on the back burner for many years because I just was not sure if I was going to be able to process all of the Shakespeare references, but at some point I was just kind of like, I gotta bite the bullet. Alright, moving on to the only thing that I didn't like. And that is that this was after like much looking through like the reviews and seeing that when people didn't like it, they DNF'd it, gave it 1 star or 2 star, and then just never explained why. And then people who did love it, they loved it, gave it 4 or 5, said all the things they enjoyed, but nothing of what might be a problem. This was me kind of like sitting down and nitpicking a little bit. This is a very niche novel. Like, these kids have been studying Shakespeare for years. They know exactly archetypes that Shakespeare does. They know the feeling from each scene. They literally reference lines within plays that they don't even have to explain what it means or which play it is. They just know that the other person that they're speaking to knows what it means in context of the conversation. So I feel like this novel is just very niche, which might make it difficult for people who are not very interested in Shakespeare, or just, quite frankly, enjoy his works. Moving on to the things that I really enjoyed, one of the cornerstones for this book for me were just the characters. I felt like you can really tell that they had been with each other for 4 years, and that they have like lived together, they wake up together, they eat dinner, lunch, breakfast together. And they studied and acted for years and years and years. There are so many hours spent studying lines, practicing blocking, all these things. You could just tell there's a lot of depth with their relationships, and a lot of complexities, and just a lot of like inside jokes that make sense considering the fact that they've known each other for so long. And I felt like it just made the tension and the slow realizations as the book progresses that much more compelling. You can really just tell and understand that these were long harbored feelings, or they had been bearing them for so long, and all this anger and tension just kept building and building and building until they could no longer do anything about it, and it just all kind of explodes. And all of like that nervousness and anxiety with like graduating soon and trying to be like more, it's just all there. And I really enjoyed seeing those characters come to life. Like they all just kind of stood out from each other despite them being based solely off an archetype within the Shakespeare like, I guess, universe. Moving on, I also really enjoyed the pacing. I felt like the pacing did really well. We got a lot of balancing between Oliver in the present, trying to make sense of the world that he's being released to now, while also explaining things in the past, and I felt like they weren't too heavy. There was a nice balance between when we'd see Oliver in the present and then flashing back for like several chapters to when we'd see Oliver in the past, and I feel like it was just well balanced and easy to follow. You never got confused or unsure about whether or not like this portion of the future or present is dragging too long, or if this portion of the past is too short. It all just flowed really nicely. I also liked the main romance. I felt like the main romance was just it was a soft build up, very slow, and almost like a we all saw it coming but you. And I feel like there was just a lot of pain and angst and just softness around it. And I like the fact that they did include that bit of queer elements in here. And it was so good. I just loved it. Like, there was not only a gay side character, but the main character is also bi. And it's just a lot of like the romance there. It built up so nicely, and I think that while it was a sad situation, it was very satisfying given the situation that the characters were in and what they put themselves in. So I think it just built up really nicely, and while sad, it was a very satisfying way to kind of tie the relationship together. Especially in the context of like of a lot of like the plays that they were doing for Shakespeare being tragic. And all just worked out. For overall thoughts, I do still think this is a very niche novel. Like, even after reading it, I was like, okay. Like, there are some instances where I like had to really think about the phrasing that they were using, or the phrases that they were using from Shakespeare, and really just try to understand it without looking it up, because I was just that stubborn. I was like, I'm not gonna need Google for this. I can't do it. I'm gonna be a big girl. We're just gonna do it. And you know, you can do it just because like the context of what they were discussing before with the Shakespeare lines worked out, but again, it's just like a little confusing sometimes, a little hard. So it is very niche, but I really did love this book. It is going to be a favorite of mine for the year. I think that the pacing and the characters were done so well, and I absolutely did enjoy this novel despite my like very limited knowledge on Shakespeare. And there were a couple of reviews on like Goodreads saying that they had no knowledge of Shakespeare and they were fine. So it's very possible that you would be able to just like, you know, process it and get it done. I ended up giving this a 5 out of 5 stars. It's definitely on the lower end, again, mainly because like lower end of 5, like, you know, it got rounded up to a 5, mainly because of how niche it is. But like, I really enjoyed it, and I would recommend it to everyone, regardless of whether or not you know Shakespeare. I would just say that you might, you know, want to make sure to Google is your like handy if you're really into like what they're referencing, or if you're just unsure, or just be like a little hesitant if you are going to pick this up and you're not the biggest Shakespeare fan. Because there's a lot of Shakespeare packed into it. It's not even just the lines. He references plays quite a lot and characters a lot, so be wary. That is it for this review of If We Were Villains by ML Rio. If you guys enjoy this kind of content from me, let me know in the comments. Also, let me know what other books you want me to review in the future. Always love suggestions. But until next time, hit like, subscribe, comment, and I'll talk to you guys in my next video. Bye!